Hey guys, tonight we begin. When you think of medieval Europe, what comes to mind? Towering stone castles, knights in shining armor, bustling markets filled with the clatter of hooves and the scent of fresh-baked bread? Sounds like a fairy tale, right? Well, hold that thought, because tonight we're not visiting a castle. We're checking into a medieval inn in York, England, circa 1342, and let me warn you, this is no cozy Airbnb with complimentary herbal tea. Think you'd survive a night in one of these places? Spoiler alert, it's less charming rustic getaway, and more zero-star survival challenge, with a side of mystery stew and strangers snoring louder than a thunderstorm. Picture this, you're trudging through mud, soaked to the bone, and you stumble into a smoky, candlelit inn that smells like burnt wood and something vaguely edible. It's loud, it's crowded, and it's about to get weird. So before you get comfy, take a second to like this video and subscribe, but only if you actually like what I'm doing here. Drop your location and local time in the comments. Where are you listening from? Dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You push open the heavy wooden door of the inn, and a wave of chaos hits you like a slap from a wet rag. It's 1342, York, England, and this rickety building on a muddy trade route is the best shelter you're gonna get. The air is thick with the smell of smoke from a roaring hearth, mixed with the sour tang of spilled ale and a stew that's been simmering since, who knows, maybe since the last king was crowned? No sleek check-in counter here, no smiling concierge offering you a mint. Instead, you're greeted by a red-faced innkeeper bellowing at a serving boy to fetch more firewood, while a dog, probably the inn's unofficial security, sniffs your boots like you owe it money. You're exhausted from a day of dodging bandits and puddles, but this place? It's not exactly screaming, relaxation station. More like, welcome to the medieval version of a dive bar, but with worse lighting. The room is a mess of sights and sounds. Long wooden tables stretch across the hall, packed with people shoulder to shoulder like sardines in a tin. There's a farmer with dirt still caked on his hands, a merchant counting coins like he's afraid they'll vanish, and a shifty-looking guy in the corner who's definitely up to no good. The noise is relentless. Clinking wooden bowls, shouts over a dice game gone wrong, and someone laughing so hard they're choking on their ale. It's like stepping into a medieval reality show, except the drama is real, and the prize is surviving the night without losing your purse, or your appetite. Compared to your favorite modern restaurant with its mood lighting and curated playlists, this place is a sensory overload. No Wi-Fi, no problem. There's enough gossip flying around to keep you connected to the rumor mill. Back in 1342, inns like this weren't just pit stops, they were lifelines. English laws from 1237 mandated that any inn along a major road had to stock bread and ale at all times. It wasn't just hospitality, it was a public service, like a medieval gas station with a side of questionable hygiene. You'd think that'd make things organized, but nah. The innkeeper's too busy yelling to care if you've got a reservation, and the only menu is whatever's bubbling in that cauldron over the fire. Some travelers, wise to the chaos, brought their own bowls, because who trusts a communal spoon that's been in 100 mouths? Historians still argue over whether these inns were cultural hubs where ideas and trade flourished or just glorified fight clubs with bad food. Spoiler, it's probably both. You squeeze onto a bench, your cloak still damp from the road, and try to make sense of the scene. The tables are scarred from years of knife fights and spilled drinks, and the floor is a mix of straw, mud, and something you hope is just spilled ale. There's no personal space, your elbows practically in the farmer's ribs, and the merchant next to you keeps eyeing your bag like it's his next paycheck. You're starving, but the thought of eating here makes you question your life choices. Modern restaurants might make you wait 20 minutes for a burger, but at least you don't have to play guess the mystery meat with every bite. Here, the innkeeper might toss you a wooden bowl and tell you to be grateful. Yelp review. 1 star, and that's generous. My bread plate was tougher than my boots. The inn's atmosphere is a far cry from the polished taverns you see in fantasy movies. No lute-playing bards in the corner, just a guy who thinks he can sing but definitely can't. The candles flicker, casting shadows that make everyone look like they're plotting something. And the smell. Oh, the smell. It's a mix of burnt stew, sweaty travelers, and whatever the dog dragged in. You'd kill for a scented candle or even a cheap air freshener, but in 1342, your only option is to breathe through your mouth and hope for the best. The inn's packed because it's the only place for miles where you can eat, drink, and maybe not freeze to death overnight. But cozy? Nah. This is survival, medieval style. You glance around, hoping for a quiet corner to eat and maybe catch a nap, but good luck with that. The dice game in the corner is getting heated, someone's accusing someone else of cheating, and you're pretty sure that's a knife glinting under the table. The innkeeper's still shouting, now at a kid who dropped a tray of mugs. It's like a medieval version of a Black Friday sale, except instead of discounted TVs, you're fighting for a spot at the table and a bowl of something that might not kill you. Historians digging through old records found that inns like this were often fined for chaos, overcrowding, watered-down ale, you name it. But in a world without TripAdvisor, what's a traveler to do? You take a deep breath, regret it instantly, and settle in. This is your home for the night, whether you like it or not. The inn's not just a place to crash, it's a microcosm of medieval life. Everyone's here, the locals swapping gossip about crop prices, the travelers sharing tales of bandits on the road, and the shady types sizing you up for later. It's like a medieval chat room, except the trolls might actually stab you. You're not just eating dinner, you're dodging elbows, eavesdropping on trade deals, and praying the guy next to you doesn't start a brawl over the last piece of bread. No one's asking for your dietary preferences. Vegan, gluten-free? Tough luck. You eat what's in front of you or go hungry. And trust me, after a day on the road, hunger wins. The inn's a place where you learn fast. Keep your wits sharp, your purse close, and maybe don't ask too many questions about what's in the pot. As you settle into the chaos, you realize this inn is less about comfort and more about survival. You're not here for a good time. You're here because the alternative is sleeping in a ditch with the wolves. The noise, the smells, the crowd, it's overwhelming, but it's also alive in a way that's hard to ignore. You're not just a traveler, you're part of a messy, loud, smelly tapestry of medieval life. And as the innkeeper finally slams a bowl of steaming stew in front of you, you brace yourself. What's in it? Who knows? But you're about to find out. Welcome to the medieval inn, where the only guarantee is that it's gonna be a long night. You're still here, wedged between a sweaty farmer and a merchant who's definitely eyeing your coin pouch, in this chaotic York inn, 1342. The noise of clattering bowls and drunken arguments fills the air, and the smoky haze from the hearth stings your eyes. You're starving after a day trudging through muddy roads, and the innkeeper finally slams a wooden bowl in front of you. It's steaming with something. Stew, they call it, but it's less a recipe and more a medieval science experiment. You lean in, hoping for a whiff of something familiar, but all you get is a vague, meaty aroma that could be anything from rabbit to regret. Think you'd survive a medieval meal? Compared to your seamless food delivery app, this is like playing culinary roulette with no send it back option. Let's dive into the gritty reality of eating at a medieval inn, where the only thing guaranteed is a full belly, if you can keep it down. The stew is the star of the show, but not in a good way. It's a murky, bubbling concoction that changes daily based on whatever the innkeeper could scrape together. If you're lucky, it's rabbit, tender and gamey. If you're not, it's squirrel, or maybe something that scurried too close to the kitchen. One traveler, probably half joking, said asking what's in the stew was the fastest way to lose your appetite. It's not a fun party game like, guess the ingredient, it's survival. The innkeeper doesn't care about your dietary preferences. Vegan? Gluten-free? Good luck explaining that to a guy who thinks fresh means killed this morning, maybe. You're handed a wooden spoon, if you're lucky, or you just use your hands. Forks. Those are a rich person's fantasy, still a century away from being common. Your only utensil is a knife you brought yourself, and even that's more for self-defense than slicing meat. Alongside the stew comes a chunk of bread, but don't expect a soft, fluffy loaf from your local bakery. This is a trencher, a dense, rock-hard slab that doubles as your plate. It's so tough you could use it to fend off a bandit, but you're supposed to eat it. The trencher soaks up the stew's greasy juices, softening just enough to be edible by the time you're done. If you can't stomach it, don't worry. The innkeeper collects these soggy bread plates and hands them out to the poor or feeds them to the pigs. Nothing goes to waste here, not even your dignity. Compared to your modern dinner plate, washed and sparkling from the dishwasher, this trencher is like eating off a medieval cutting board that's seen better days. Yelp review. 1 star, my plate was tougher than my boots, and the stew was a mystery I didn't want to solve. The stew pot itself is a legend. English laws from 1237 required inns to serve food to travelers, so the kitchen never stops. That cauldron over the fire? It's never empty. Yesterday's porridge becomes today's stew, and Monday's leftovers are Tuesday's main course. Some travelers swore certain inns had pots simmering for years, like a culinary time capsule. This wasn't laziness, it was thriftiness. Food poisoning? They didn't call it that, they called it Tuesday. Historians still debate whether this recycling was a clever way to stretch resources or just a recipe for disaster. Either way, you're eating history, literally. The pot's a bubbling archive of every meal served in this inn, and you're about to become part of it. If you've got a few extra coins, you might splurge on something fancier, like a piece of cheese that hasn't gone completely green or a cut of meat you can actually identify. If the inn's near a river, maybe there's fish, though fresh is a generous term when it's been sitting in a barrel for days. You're still eating at a communal table, elbow to elbow with strangers, so don't expect a private dining experience. Table manners are simple. Try not to stab your neighbor while reaching for the trencher. The guy next to you might be a farmer swapping crop prices or a merchant sealing a deal, and the table's alive with chatter. It's like a medieval podcast, except you're in it, and the topic is whatever rumor's hot tonight. The communal setup isn't just about eating, it's where news travels. You hear about bandits on the road, the price of wool in Bruges, or a king's latest scandal. It's chaotic, but it's also connection, medieval style. No one's tweeting, but the table's buzzing with the same energy as a group chat. You're not just eating, you're eavesdropping, negotiating, or dodging a fist if someone thinks you grabbed their bread. Historians argue over whether these communal meals sparked trade networks or just arguments over the last trencher. Probably both. One thing's sure, you're not getting a quiet dinner. The inn's a living, breathing hub, and you're stuck in the middle, spoon in hand, wondering if that's a bone or a twig in your stew. Eating here is less about enjoyment and more about survival. You're not savoring flavors, you're fueling up to make it through the night. The stew's warm, at least, and it fills the gnawing hole in your stomach. But every bite comes with a side of suspicion. Is that a carrot or something that crawled into the pot by mistake? No one's telling, and you're too hungry to care. Modern dining woes, like a long wait for takeout or a cold pizza, seem like a dream compared to this. At least your delivery driver doesn't expect you to share a table with a guy who smells like he bathed in ale. The inn's food is a test of endurance, and you're passing, barely. But as you scrape the last of the stew from your trencher, you realize the meal's just the beginning. The real challenge is what comes next, finding a place to sleep in this madhouse. You're still crammed at that rickety table in the York Inn, 1342, your bowl of mystery stew barely touched because, frankly, you're still debating if it's food or a dare. The air's thick with smoke and the chatter of strangers, and your trencher, that rock-hard bread plate, is starting to look like a better weapon than a meal. But just when you think things can't get any wilder, the innkeeper sloshes a mug of ale in front of you. It's not the crisp, cold beer you'd order at a modern bar. This stuff is dark, cloudy, and so thick you could probably chew it. In medieval England, ale isn't just a drink, it's a survival tool, safer than the murky water from the local stream. Think you'd make it through a night of medieval drinking? Compared to your iced latte or bottled water, this is like signing a contract with your taste buds. You're in for a ride, and there's no turning back. This ale is the lifeblood of the inn. Back in 1342, everyone drinks it. Men, women, even kids, gulping down about a gallon a day. Why? Because water's a gamble. Streams were often dumping grounds for, well, everything. Sewage, dead animals, you name it. Ale, boiled during brewing, was the medieval equivalent of a Brita filter. English laws from 1237 didn't just suggest inns keep ale on hand, they mandated it, like it was a public health service. And trust me, it was. You're not sipping this for fun, you're sipping to stay alive. But don't expect a craft brew with notes of citrus and hops. This ale's warm, gritty, and so dense you'd need both hands to lift the mug. One traveler swore you could stand a spoon in it, if you could find your spoon after dropping it in the muck. The taste. Imagine liquid bread with a kick, brewed with whatever barley or herbs the innkeeper had lying around. Some alesh were so thick they doubled as a meal, which was handy when the stew was more mystery than meat. Historians still debate whether ale was a legitimate source of nutrition or just an excuse to stay buzzed all day. Either way, it's what's keeping you going. You take a cautious sip, and it hits like a punch, earthy, sour, and with a texture that's more soup than drink. Compared to your modern fridge stocked with sparkling water and energy drinks, this is like choosing between a punch to the face or a kick to the shin. At least the ale won't kill you. Probably. Yelp review. 1 star, the ale's like drinking porridge, but at least I'm still alive. The innkeeper's not exactly pouring with precision. Your mug's overflowing, splashing onto the already sticky table. Everyone's drinking, and the mood's getting looser by the minute. The farmer next to you raises his mug, slurring something about crop prices, while the merchant across the table's already on his third, bragging about a deal in Flanders. Ale's not just fuel, it's the social glue of this place. It loosens tongues, sparks fights, and makes everyone think they're a poet. You're not at a modern bar with a designated driver waiting. Here, you drink, you deal, and you hope you don't pass out before claiming a bed. The inn's alive with the clink of mugs and the roar of laughter, like a medieval frat party, minus the red solo cups. But there's a catch, there's always a catch. Some inns were notorious for watering down their ale, stretching their supply to save a few coins. In 1342, York records show innkeepers fined for serving weak brews in unmarked containers, a serious offense when ale was practically currency. You're lucky if your mug's the real deal, but even then, it's not exactly refreshing. It's warm, it's heavy, and it's got bits floating in it that you don't want to identify. One quirky detail from the time. Some travelers complained the ale was so thick it was basically porridge, and they weren't wrong. You're not drinking for pleasure. You're drinking because it's safer than the alternative. Modern water purifiers? A distant dream. Here, your purifier is a cauldron and a prayer. The communal table's buzzing now, and the ale's to blame. Conversations get louder, arguments get dumber, and someone's already singing a ballad about a knight who definitely didn't exist. You're trying to focus on your mug, but the guy next to you keeps sloshing his ale while gesturing wildly about a sheep deal gone wrong. It's like a medieval open mic night, except everyone's a performer, and no one's sober. The inn's not just a place to eat and sleep, it's a stage where ale fuels the drama. You take another sip, wincing at the grit between your teeth, and wonder how anyone survived this era. But as the ale warms your belly, you start to relax, just a little. The night's young, and the inn's about to get even rowdier. Good luck keeping up. You're still stuck in this York Inn, 1342, nursing a mug of ale so thick it's practically a meal. Your bowl of mystery stew sits half-eaten, mostly because you're still trying to figure out if that was a bone or a stick you just bit into. The smoky air's buzzing with noise, clinking mugs, shouts over a dice game, and the innkeeper yelling at someone to stop spilling. You're wedged at a long wooden table, elbow to elbow with a cast of characters straight out of a medieval soap opera. A farmer with dirt under his nails, a merchant counting coins like they're his lifeline, and a shifty guy who's definitely not here for the stew. Think you'd handle the social chaos of a medieval inn? Compared to your quiet dinner at home with Netflix in the background, this is like being dropped into a live-action group chat with no mute button. Let's dig into the madness of communal dining, where news, deals, and drama collide, often with a side of flying fists. These tables aren't just for eating, they're the medieval internet. In 1342, with no newspapers or phones, this is where information flows. You're not just chewing on a tough trencher, you're overhearing the price of wool in Bruges, rumors of bandits on the road, or whispers about a lord's scandalous affair. The farmer next to you's grumbling about a bad harvest, while the merchant's haggling over a deal that'll take him to Flanders. It's like Twitter, except the trolls are real, and they've got knives. Everyone's talking at once, and you're catching snippets of news that could save your life, or at least your coin purse. Historians still argue whether these communal tables were the backbone of medieval trade networks or just a recipe for chaos. Spoiler: it's probably both. You're trying to eat, but it's hard when your neighbor's elbow keeps knocking your mug. Table manners? Forget it. The rule is simple: don't stab anyone while reaching for the bread. Most folks carry their own knives, partly for cutting meat, partly because you never know when a dice game might turn ugly. Some travelers, paranoid about the inn's hygiene or lack thereof, even brought their own spoons, because sharing a communal one feels like playing germ roulette. One quirky detail: a few seasoned travelers carried knives with handles carved to look like saints, thinking it might bring luck. Spoiler: it didn't. You're lucky if you get through the meal without someone accidentally nicking your sleeve or your purse. The table's a melting pot of people and purposes. There's the farmer swapping crop tips, the merchant sealing a deal over ale, and the guy in the corner who's definitely planning something shady. You're not just eating, you're networking, eavesdropping, and dodging trouble. The noise is relentless: laughter, arguments, and someone trying to sing a ballad but forgetting half the words. It's like a medieval open mic night, except the stage is a sticky table, and the audience is too drunk to care. Compared to your modern dining setup, maybe a quiet restaurant with a curated playlist, this is chaos incarnate. Yelp review: 1 star, too crowded, and my neighbor's life story came with the stew. These communal tables were vital, though. In 1342, inns like this were the pulse of medieval society, connecting people across regions. A merchant might learn about a new trade route, or a farmer might hear about a drought 2 towns over. Deals were struck, friendships formed, and fights started, all over a shared trencher. The inn's not just a place to eat, it's a hub where the world's news, gossip, and schemes collide. You're not just a traveler, you're a node in a network, whether you like it or not. But it's not all rosy. That guy next to you? He's not just chatty, he's sizing you up, wondering if your bag's worth stealing later. You learn fast: keep your knife close and your wits closer. The chaos isn't just social, it's physical. The table's scarred from years of spilled ale and knife fights, and the floor's a mix of straw, mud, and something you're hoping is just spilled stew. You're trying to focus on your meal, but someone's shouting about a bad dice roll, and another guy's bragging about his horse like it's a Ferrari. It's like a medieval reality show, and you're an unwilling contestant. The innkeeper's no help. He's too busy refilling mugs and breaking up arguments. Laws from the time, like those in 1237 England, required inns to serve food and drink, but they didn't say anything about keeping the peace. You're on your own, dodging elbows and trying not to make eye contact with the wrong person. As you scrape the last of your stew, you realize this table's more than a place to eat, it's a stage. Every conversation's a performance, every deal's a gamble, and every stranger's a potential friend or foe. You're not just surviving a meal, you're navigating a social minefield. The ale's making you a little fuzzy, and the noise is starting to blur into a dull roar. You're almost ready to call it a night, but in this inn, night is just when the real chaos begins. Good luck finding a spot to sleep in this madhouse. You're gonna need it. You've survived the mystery stew and a mug of ale thick enough to double as mortar, still wedged at that chaotic communal table in the York Inn, 1342. The noise, clinking mugs, drunken ballads, and arguments over dice, hasn't let up, and the smoky air's making your eyes water. Your belly's full, if a bit uneasy, and exhaustion from the muddy road is hitting hard. All you want is a corner to crash, maybe a soft bed to dream away the day's chaos. But this is a medieval inn, not a Holiday Inn Express. The dining hall's about to transform into a dormitory, and private room is a fantasy for the rich. Think you'd survive a night sleeping medieval style? Compared to your memory foam mattress and Egyptian cotton sheets, this is like signing up for a human lasagna, layered with strangers, snores, and bugs. Let's dive into the awkward, itchy reality of bedding down in a medieval inn. Oh, and you still awake? Or are you already dreaming of dodging a snoring merchant's elbow? As the last trenchers are cleared, or fed to the pigs, the innkeeper starts barking orders. The tables are pushed aside, and the dining hall morphs into a communal sleeping area. No private rooms for common folk like you, you're in what's generously called a bedroom, but it's just the same smoky hall with straw mattresses rolled out on the floor. These aren't cozy bunks, they're wooden frames with rope supports, sagging under the weight of lumpy mattresses stuffed with straw, hay, or, if you're at a fancy inn, wool. The bedding's crawling with fleas and lice, so common that nobody bothers complaining. It's like checking into a hostel where the bed bugs are listed as amenities. Compared to your modern bedroom with its blackout curtains and white noise machine, this is a nightmare dressed up as a nap. You're not sleeping alone, either. The innkeeper's motto seems to be, "Pack 'em in tight." A single mattress, barely big enough for two by today's standards, might hold 4 grown adults. Your bedmates. A merchant who smells like ale, a pilgrim muttering prayers, and a guy who's already snoring like a war horn. You're so close you can feel their breath, and trust me, it's not minty fresh. In 1352, English town councils tried to enforce hygiene by mandating that innkeepers change linens every 3 months. 3 months. Your modern laundry routine would make a medieval innkeeper faint. Sheets, if they exist, are stained and stiff, reused until they're more rag than fabric. One quirky detail: some savvy travelers brought their own sleeping sacks, like medieval sleeping bags, to avoid the inn's questionable linens. Smart move, but it didn't stop the fleas. Historians still debate whether these shared sleeping setups built community or just spread disease faster. Probably both. You're trying to find a spot that's not too close to the guy who's muttering about bandits, but space is tight. The straw mattress crunches under you, poking through the thin cloth, and you're pretty sure something just crawled across your arm. Modern hotels have "do not disturb" signs. Medieval inns have "deal with it" vibes. You pull your cloak tight, hoping it's a barrier against the bugs, and try to ignore the symphony of snores, coughs, and rustling straw. It's like trying to sleep in a barn during a rock concert. Yelp review. 1 star, my bedmate's snoring could wake a dragon, and the fleas threw a party. If you're lucky, or rich, you might snag a private chamber, but don't get your hopes up. These luxury rooms are just tiny corners with thin wooden walls, barely muffling the chaos outside. You're still not alone. Rats and mice claim the space as their own, scurrying across the floor like they own the lease. Even nobles weren't spared the awkwardness. Their body servants often slept at the foot of the bed, curled up like loyal dogs, partly for protection, partly because there's nowhere else to put them. Imagine trying to sleep with your bodyguard snoring 2 feet away. Privacy. That's a concept centuries away from being invented. You're lucky if your private room has a door, and even then, it probably doesn't lock. The lack of privacy isn't just annoying, it's a social experiment. You're sharing a bed with strangers whose names you don't know, but whose sleeping habits you'll never forget. The merchants tossing and turning, the pilgrims muttering about salvation, and the drunk guys drooling on your cloak. You're not just sleeping, you're surviving a night of involuntary cuddling. Some travelers claimed these shared beds forged bonds, friendships, business deals, even marriages started in these cramped quarters. But let's be real, you're more likely to catch fleas than feelings. The inn's a pressure cooker of human interaction, and you're just trying to make it to dawn without losing your sanity, or your shoes. As you lie there, staring at the flickering shadows on the ceiling, you realize sleep is a luxury you can't afford. The straw's poking your back, the fleas are having a feast, and the guy next to you just rolled over, pinning your arm. You're not in a bedroom, you're in a medieval mosh pit. Modern sleep aids like lavender pillows or ASMR playlists. Pure fantasy. Here, your lullaby is the creak of the inn's timbers and the guy who won't stop coughing. You close your eyes, hoping for a few hours of rest, but deep down, you know, this night's only getting weirder. You're still in this chaotic York Inn, 1342, sprawled on a lumpy straw mattress with a snoring merchant pressed against your side and fleas treating you like an all-you-can-eat buffet. The communal sleeping hall is a symphony of coughs, grumbles, and rustling straw, and you're dreaming of a quiet corner to escape the madness. But in this medieval madhouse, privacy is a privilege reserved for the wealthy. And even then, it's not what you'd hope. You're picturing a cozy room with a locked door and clean sheets, maybe a hint of the modern hotel vibe with fluffy pillows and a minibar. Spoiler, a private room in a medieval inn is less boutique getaway, and more slightly less crowded chaos with bonus rats. Think you'd splurge for a medieval upgrade? Compared to your modern bedroom with blackout curtains and a box spring, this is like paying extra for a closet with a side of vermin. Let's step into the so-called luxury of a private chamber, where the dream of solitude crashes hard into reality. You've got a few extra coins, maybe you sold some wool or dodged a bandit's toll, so you convince the innkeeper to give you a private room. He grumbles, eyeing your purse like it's his next meal, and leads you to a corner of the inn partitioned by a thin wooden wall. This isn't a suite, it's a cubbyhole, barely big enough for a narrow bed and a stool. The walls are so flimsy you can hear the drunken ballad singing from the communal hall, word for slurred word. The bed's a slight upgrade from the straw piles downstairs, maybe it's stuffed with wool instead of hay, but it's still a creaky wooden frame with ropes sagging like a tired hammock. The sheets, if you can call them that, haven't been washed since the last harvest, and they're speckled with stains you don't want to identify. Modern hotels have turn-down service. This place has "hope the rats don't eat your shoes" service. You're not alone, either. Rats and mice scurry across the floor, treating your room like their personal playground. One quirky detail: some travelers swore the rats were so bold they'd steal breadcrumbs right off your bed. The inn's unofficial staff, apparently. You'd kill for a modern exterminator, but in 1342, these critters are just part of the package. Even the wealthy couldn't escape them. Records from 1350 show noble travelers complaining about unwanted roommates in their chambers. Your private room might keep out the snoring merchant, but it's open season for anything with 4 legs and a taste for your leftovers. Yelp review: 1 star, paid extra for a room, got a rat convention instead. Then there's the human element. If you're a noble or a rich merchant, you might have a body servant trailing you, think personal assistant, but armed and sleeping at the foot of your bed. Yes, literally. They curl up across the doorway or at the bed's edge, partly to guard you, partly because there's nowhere else to put them. Imagine trying to sleep with your security guy snoring 2 feet away, his sword clanking every time he rolls over. It's like sharing a hotel room with a coworker who insists on practicing karate at midnight. This odd custom was so common that historians note it in records from 14th century England, with servants listed as bed-foot companions. Privacy. Not a chance. You're paying for a room, not solitude. The walls don't help. They're so thin you can hear the dice game downstairs, the couple arguing next door, and probably the innkeeper counting his coins. You're basically sleeping in a medieval surround sound system, except it's all bad news and off-key singing. Historians debate whether these private chambers were a true privilege or just an overpriced illusion of status. Spoiler: it's the latter. You're still part of the inn's chaos, just with a flimsy barrier and a higher bill. The door, if it exists, doesn't lock. Security's your own knife under the pillow. Compared to your modern deadbolt and "do not disturb" sign, this is like paying for a VIP ticket to a riot. You try to settle in, pulling your cloak tight against the chill and the creeping sense of regret. The bed creaks with every move, and the straw mattress pokes your ribs like it's holding a grudge. You're pretty sure something just skittered across your foot, and you're praying it's not carrying the plague. Some travelers, wise to the inn's hygiene, brought their own bedding, think medieval sleeping bags, to avoid the lice-infested sheets. Smart, but it doesn't stop the rats from staging a midnight parade. You're exhausted, but sleep feels like a gamble. The noise from the communal hall leaks through, and you're starting to wonder if you'd have been better off with the snoring merchant downstairs. At least you'd have company to complain to. This so-called luxury is a reminder. In a medieval inn, no one escapes the chaos. You're just paying extra to pretend you're above it. The rats don't care about your status, and neither does the cold draft sneaking through the cracks. You close your eyes, trying to block out the sounds of drunken laughter and scampering paws, but it's no use. This is your night, alone, but not really, in a room that's more closet than castle. Good luck dreaming of anything but fleas and creaky boards. You're still in this creaky York Inn, 1342, barely settled into your so-called private room, which feels more like a rat-infested closet than a sanctuary. The thin walls do nothing to block the noise from the communal hall, where the drunken singing and clinking mugs are still going strong. You're itching from the fleas, praying the straw mattress doesn't collapse under you, and wondering if sleep is even possible. But downstairs, the night's just getting started. The sun's gone down, and the inn's transforming from a chaotic dining hall into a full-blown medieval party zone. Think you'd survive the nightlife at a 14th century inn? Compared to your modern bar with its craft cocktails and chill playlists, this is like stumbling into a frat house where everyone's armed and the drinks are suspiciously chunky. Let's dive into the rowdy, ale-soaked madness of a medieval inn after dark, where the entertainment's loud, the fights are louder, and sleep feels like a distant dream. The heart of the nightlife is the ale, and it's flowing like a river. You thought the stuff you choked down with dinner was rough? It's nothing compared to what's happening now. Medieval ale isn't your crisp, cold IPA. It's warm, cloudy, and so thick it's practically a meal. In 1342, people drank about a gallon a day, not for fun but because water was basically a death trap, full of sewage and who knows. Records from the time confirm ale was boiled, making it safer than the local stream, and laws from 1237 mandated every inn keep a steady supply. It's not just a drink, it's a public health service. You're back at the communal table, and the innkeeper's sloshing more ale into your mug, whether you asked for it or not. One quirky detail: some inns served ale so dense you could feel it stick to your ribs, and patrons swore the inn's cat could sing better than the drunks by midnight. The ale fuels the chaos, and the main attraction is dice games. They're simple, addictive, and a fast track to losing your coins, or your temper. You watch as a farmer and a merchant huddle over a table, rolling dice and shouting accusations of cheating. It's like a medieval casino, but with worse odds and no free drinks. Fights break out faster than you can say, loaded dice, and that's why many towns, including York, had laws banning weapons in taverns. Knives, though. Those are fair game. Everyone carries one for eating, and the line between cutting bread and settling a score is blurry. You're trying to sip your ale, but the guy next to you's waving his knife like he's auditioning for a duel. Compared to your modern game night with pizza and board games, this is like playing poker in a cage match. Yelp review: 1 star, lost my coins and nearly my fingers in a dice game. Then there's the singing. Picture a room full of half-drunk travelers belting out ballads about heroic knights, tragic loves, or battles that probably never happened. The songs have endless verses, and by the 10th, everyone's slurring so badly even the inn's cat could carry a better tune. These group sing-alongs are the medieval equivalent of karaoke, except there's no microphone, and the lyrics get weirder with every mug. You're caught between laughing and wincing as the farmer tries to hit a high note and fails spectacularly. It's loud, it's messy, and it's weirdly unifying, until someone starts arguing over the words. Historians debate whether these tavern songs were early forms of cultural exchange or just drunken noise. Spoiler: it's both, but mostly noise. Some inns get lucky and attract traveling performers, minstrels, storytellers, or jesters who trade tales for a meal and a less buggy spot to sleep. A minstrel might strum a lute and spin a story about a dragon-slaying knight, though the details get hazy after his third ale. These performers aren't just entertainers, they're news carriers, bringing gossip from distant towns. You're listening, half interested, as he describes a market fire in London, but you're mostly wondering if he'll pass out before the story's done. These guys are the medieval equivalent of a podcast host, except you might toss them a coin, or a trencher, if they're good. If they're bad, they're sleeping with the rats. You're not at a modern concert with overpriced tickets. This is raw, unfiltered, and occasionally awful entertainment. The real draw, though, is the gossip. In a world without newspapers, the inn's tavern is the newsroom. You hear about a lord's scandal, a bandit ambush on the road, or a new tax that's got everyone grumbling. It's like scrolling through a medieval X-feed, but with more shouting and fewer memes. The ale loosens tongues, and suddenly everyone's an expert on politics or crop prices. You're just trying to stay out of it, but the guy next to you's spilling his life story, and you're learning more about wool prices than you ever wanted. The curfew bell rings, 9 p.m. in winter, 10 p.m. in summer, signaling quiet time, but good luck with that. The revelry keeps going, especially if the local sheriff's knocking back mugs with the rest. You're stuck in the middle, wondering how you'll ever sleep through this racket. You're still in this rowdy York inn, 1342, where the ale's flowing, the dice games are one roll away from a fistfight, and the communal table's a mess of spilled mugs and half-sung ballads. The curfew bell rang a while ago, signaling the official end of the chaos, but nobody's listening. Least of all the drunk guy trying to lead a sing-along that's more howl than harmony. Your straw mattress in the corner is calling, but the inn's nightlife is in full swing, and a new player just stepped into the smoky spotlight, a traveling minstrel, lute slung over his shoulder, ready to earn his supper. Think you'd enjoy a medieval performance? Compared to your modern Spotify playlist or a stand-up comedy show, this is like watching a live podcast with a 50-50 chance of brilliance or disaster. Let's dive into the world of traveling performers, the wandering souls who brought stories, songs, and a touch of chaos to the medieval inn. The minstrel struts into the hall, his cloak patched but colorful, his grin promising a show. He's not just here to entertain, he's here to survive. Performers like him roam from town to town, trading tales and tunes for a hot meal, a mug of ale, or maybe a less flea-infested spot to sleep. He starts plucking his lute, and the crowd quiets, just a little, as he launches into a ballad about a knight who slew a dragon, or maybe it was a wolf, depending on how much ale he's had. The story's half made up, but it's gripping, and you're leaning in despite yourself. These performers aren't just singers, they're the medieval newsfeed, carrying gossip, rumors, and tall tales from distant markets. In 14th century Europe, minstrels were common, with records showing they performed in inns from York to Paris, stitching together a patchwork of stories that kept travelers hooked. His performance is raw, unpolished, and occasionally off-key. If he's good, he'll have the room cheering, tossing him coins or a chunk of bread. If he's bad, well, he might dodge a mug or two. One quirky detail: some minstrels were so terrible they got chased out of inns, with patrons pelting them with trenchers for butchering a favorite song. You're watching this guy, hoping he's decent, because a good story might distract you from the itch of fleas or the guy next to you spilling ale on your cloak. Compared to a modern concert with pyrotechnics and autotune, this is like busking on a subway platform. Gritty, unpredictable, and weirdly charming. Yelp review: 1 star, the minstrel forgot the lyrics, but at least he dodged the bread. These performers do more than entertain, they're information hubs. The minstrel's tale might include news of a market fire in London or a new tax in Flanders, mixed with a love story that's probably fiction. You're hearing about the world beyond York's muddy roads, and it's the closest you'll get to a newspaper. Historians debate whether these wandering entertainers were early journalists or just glorified gossips spreading half-truths. Probably both. Either way, they're a lifeline in a world where news travels at the speed of a tired horse. You're half listening, half watching the crowd, as the merchant next to you nods along, probably calculating how that market fire affects his will trade. The inn's a stage, and the minstrel's the star, for now. Not all performers are minstrels. Some inns get jesters, juggling knives or telling bawdy jokes that make the farmers roar. Others host storytellers who spin tales of saints or bandits, depending on the crowd's mood. These guys are the medieval equivalent of a YouTube vlogger, except their content comes with a side of ale and a risk of getting booed off the table. They work for tips, food, drink, or a spot by the fire instead of the rat-infested corner. You toss the minstrel a coin, mostly because his story about a cursed bridge is more interesting than the farmer's rant about sheep. But you're also wondering if he's making it all up. Spoiler, he probably is, but in 1342, who's fact-checking? The performance isn't just a break from the chaos, it's part of it. The crowd's shouting suggestions, heckling, or joining in with their own off-key verses. It's like an open mic night where everyone's a critic and nobody's sober. The minstrel's lute drowns out the dice game arguments, but only just, and you're caught between amusement and exhaustion. Modern entertainment, streamed movies, curated playlists, feels like a distant dream. Here, you're in the thick of it, surrounded by sweaty strangers who think they're backup singers. The innkeeper's keeping an eye on the crowd, ready to swing a stick if the heckling turns into a brawl. It's entertainment, medieval style, loud, messy, and one wrong note away from a fight. As the minstrel wraps up, the crowd's either cheering or groaning, depending on how many verses he butchered. You're ready to crawl back to your straw mattress, but the night's far from over. The ale's still flowing, the dice are still rolling, and the inn's humming with energy. You're starting to see why people keep coming back to these places, despite the fleas and the stew. It's not just a bed or a meal, it's a front row seat to the medieval world, for better or worse. But as the minstrel starts another song, you're already dreading the moment you have to squeeze back into that crowded sleeping hall. You're still stuck in this smoky York Inn, 1342, the minstrel's off-key ballad fading as the crowd roars with laughter or groans at his butchered verses. Your mug of ale's gone warm, the straw mattress in the corner's calling, but the inn's too alive to let you slip away. The dice games are heating up, and the air's thick with the smell of spilled ale and questionable stew. The communal table's a mess of empty trenchers and loudmouths, each one trying to out-talk the next. This isn't just a place to eat or sleep, it's a buzzing hub where gossip flows faster than the ale. Think you'd keep up with the medieval rumor mill? Compared to your modern X feed or group chat, this is like scrolling through a social network where every post comes with a side of shouting and a risk of getting punched. Let's dive into the chaotic world of gossip, where news, lies, and drama collide over sticky tables. In 1342, with no newspapers or internet, the inn's communal table is the closest thing to a newsroom. You're wedged between a farmer ranting about crop prices and a merchant bragging about his latest deal, and every word's a headline. Someone's heard about a bandit attack on the road to London, another swears the king's raising taxes again. It's not just local chatter. Travelers bring tales from distant markets, like a shipwreck in Flanders or a feud in Paris. You're picking up snippets that could save your life, like which roads to avoid, or just juicy gossip about a lord's scandalous affair. Historians debate whether these conversations shaped medieval culture or just amplified chaos. Spoiler: it's both, but with more shouting. This is Twitter, 14th century style, except the trolls are drunk and sitting next to you. You're trying to sip your ale, but the guy beside you's spilling his life story, complaining about a bad deal while waving his knife for emphasis. Everyone's got a story, and they're not shy about sharing. The farmer's muttering about a drought 2 towns over, the merchant's whispering about a rival's shady business, and the shady guy in the corner's eavesdropping like he's planning something. One quirky detail: some innkeepers could guess where you were from just by how you griped about their ale. Apparently, Londoners hated York's brew the most. You're not just eating, you're plugged into a network of rumors that could make or break your next move. Compared to your modern news app, this is raw, unfiltered, and occasionally unhinged. Yelp review: 1 star, learned the price of wheat in Bruges before I learned my neighbor's name. Gossip isn't just entertainment, it's currency. A well-timed rumor could seal a trade deal or spark a fight. You overhear a merchant negotiating with a farmer, using news of a far-off market crash to haggle down the price of grain. Across the table, 2 travelers are arguing over whether a local lord's really plotting against the king. It's like a live podcast, except the hosts are half drunk and nobody's fact-checking. Some of these stories lead to real outcomes. Business partnerships form, alliances are made, and grudges are born, often over the same mug of ale. You're not just a bystander, you're in the mix, whether you like it or not. One wrong word, and you're the next hot topic. Keep your mouth shut, and you might miss a tip that saves your purse, or your neck. The inn's gossip mill doesn't just spread news, it shapes the world. A rumor about bandits could change a traveler's route, a whisper about a new tax could spark a protest. In 1342, inns were the internet hubs of their day, connecting people across regions. You're hearing about places you'll never see, from the spice markets of Bruges to the plague-ridden streets of Paris. It's chaotic, but it's also how ideas spread, new farming tricks, trade routes, even recipes, though you're not sure you trust the inn's stew as cuisine. The downside? Half the stories are exaggerated, and the other half are outright lies. You're learning to listen with one ear and keep your hand on your knife with the other. As the night drags on, the gossip gets wilder. Someone's claiming they saw a witch in the woods, another swears the innkeeper's watering down the ale, again. The table's a pressure cooker of half-truths and hot tempers, and you're just trying to stay out of it. Modern social media might flood you with clickbait, but at least you can mute it. Here, you're stuck, surrounded by voices that won't quit. The curfew bell's long forgotten, and the inn's still buzzing. You're starting to see why these places were the heartbeat of medieval life. Messy, loud, and impossible to ignore. But as the ale runs low and the stories get sloppier, you're just hoping for a quiet corner to crash. Good luck with that. You're still in the smoky chaos of this York Inn, 1342, your ears ringing from the gossip swirling around the communal table. The minstrel's long gone, probably sleeping off his ale in a corner, and the dice games are one bad roll away from a brawl. Your mug's empty, the mystery stews a distant regret, and the straw mattress in the communal hall is starting to look almost inviting, fleas and all. But as the night drags on, you notice the innkeepers pacing, brandishing a heavy stick and glaring at the rowdy crowd. There are rules in this place, supposedly, meant to keep the madness in check. Think you'd play by the medieval inn's rulebook? Compared to your modern hotel's clear check-in policies and no smoking signs, these rules are more like vague suggestions, enforced with a scowl and a swing of that stick. Let's dive into the shaky world of medieval inn regulations, where order's a pipe dream and chaos is the real boss. You still awake? Or are you dreaming of dodging the innkeeper's fines already? First rule, pay up front, or you're in trouble. Inns aren't charity houses, and the innkeepers got no patience for freeloaders. You're expected to hand over your coins before you touch a drop of ale or a spoonful of stew. Don't have the cash? Kiss your horse goodbye, it's collateral until you settle the tab. In 1314, York records show travelers losing cloaks, swords, even boots to cover unpaid bills. Some poor souls ended up mucking stables to work off their debt, a far cry from the questionable comfort of the inn's straw beds. You're clutching your coin purse, hoping you budgeted enough, because modern credit cards are a fantasy, and "I'll pay later" isn't a thing. Yelp review. 1 star, they took my horse because I asked for a late checkout. Second rule, no sword fights inside. Sounds obvious, right? Wrong. Drunken brawls were so common that towns like York had specific laws against drawing blades in taverns. In 1273, London fined a guy 20 shillings, enough to buy a week's lodging, for pulling a sword over a dice dispute. Knives, though. Those are fine, since everyone carries one for eating. The line between slicing bread and settling a score is conveniently blurry, and you're eyeing the guy next to you, whose eating knife looks awfully sharp. Compared to your modern bar's bouncer checking IDs, this is like the Wild West with worse hygiene. You're just hoping the dice game doesn't end with you dodging a blade. Third rule, keep it down after curfew. The town bell rings, 9 p.m. in winter, 10 p.m. in summer, signaling lights out and quiet time. In theory, the inn locks its doors, and everyone settles in for the night. In reality, good luck. The drunks keep singing, the dice keep rolling, and the innkeeper's too busy refilling mugs to care, especially if the local sheriff's joining the party. Larger inns on trade routes like this one often ignored curfew entirely, turning the night into a blurry mess of ale and arguments. You're wishing for modern noise-canceling headphones, but all you've got is a cloak to pull over your ears. One quirky detail, some inns required guests to join morning prayers as a quiet time penalty, which feels like adding insult to injury after a sleepless night. Fourth rule, don't steal from other guests. Theft was rampant, with travelers waking up to find their purses gone or their boots missing. Innkeepers sometimes posted warnings that they weren't responsible for lost goods, but that didn't stop the sticky fingers. Some offered secure storage for valuables, for a fee, of course. You're sleeping with your coin purse tied to your neck, because leaving it under the mattress is an invitation to disaster. Smart travelers learned to keep their valuables close, like medieval fanny packs, but even that wasn't foolproof. Compared to your modern hotel safe, this is like trusting your wallet to a room full of pickpockets. Fifth rule, no sick travelers during plague outbreaks. If you're coughing or sporting suspicious spots, you're out, sometimes left to sleep in the woods. Towns enforced primitive quarantines, with some requiring travelers to wait outside the walls for days before entering. In 1342, with the Black Death looming, this rule was life or death. You're praying you don't sneeze, because one wrong symptom could land you in exile. Enforcement varied wildly. Rich guests could break every rule and get a wink from the innkeeper, while a poor traveler might get tossed for spilling ale. In 1314, a York innkeeper was fined for selling ale in unmarked containers, showing even the bosses faced rules, though they didn't always follow them either. Historians debate whether these regulations reflected real control or just a flimsy attempt at order. Spoiler: chaos usually won. You're watching the innkeeper swing his stick, trying to herd this drunken crowd like cats in a rainstorm. The rules are there, but they're more like guidelines, and nobody's in a hurry to comply. You're just hoping to make it to your mattress without losing your purse or catching a stray knife. The inn's a law unto itself, and you're learning fast. Survival means staying sharp, even when the ale's dulling your edges. You're still clinging to survival in this York Inn, 1342, where the ale's thick, the rules are more like suggestions, and the communal table's a hotbed of gossip and dice-fueled drama. The innkeeper's swinging his stick, trying to herd the drunken crowd, but the noise, slurred ballads, clinking mugs and shouted bets, shows no sign of slowing. Your straw mattress awaits, but the thought of squeezing between snoring strangers and fleas isn't exactly comforting. You're clutching your coin purse, hyper-aware of the shifty glances from the guy in the corner. This inn isn't just chaotic, it's a magnet for trouble. Think you'd outsmart the dangers of a medieval inn? Compared to your modern hotel with keycard locks and security cameras, this place is a thief's playground, where every shadow hides a threat. Let's dive into the dark side of inn life, where robbery, betrayal, and worse are just part of the package. The biggest danger isn't the mystery stew or the fleas, it's the people. Theft is so common it's practically a feature of the inn. You're not just sharing a table with farmers and merchants, you're dining with opportunists who'd lift your purse faster than you can say, "Another ale." Some thieves are bold, slipping a hand into your bag while you're distracted by a dice game. Others are sneakier, using peepholes in the walls or pretending to be friendly to scout your belongings. In 1347, Paris records noted that 20% of crimes were linked to inns, with travelers losing everything from coins to cloaks. You're learning fast. Sleep with your purse under your head, because leaving it unguarded is like hanging a "take me" sign on it. Compared to your modern wallet with a PIN code, this is like carrying cash in a pickpocket's paradise. Worse, the innkeeper might be in on it. Some were notorious for tipping off local thieves, pointing out who's carrying gold or who's too drunk to notice a missing bag. You catch the innkeeper's eye as he pours another mug, and his smile feels less "welcome" and more "I know what's in your cloak." One quirky detail: some thieves left calling cards, a slashed cloak or a knotted string, as a taunt to their victims. You're double-checking your belongings, wishing for a modern hotel safe, but all you've got is your knife and a prayer. Historians debate whether inns were crime hubs or just easy targets due to the mix of strangers and ale. Spoiler: they were both, and you're right in the crosshairs. You're not safe even if you dodge the pickpockets. Some thieves posed as fellow travelers, sharing your table and swapping stories to learn your plans. That friendly merchant asking about your route to London? He might be passing your itinerary to a bandit waiting outside. You're keeping your answers vague, but it's hard when the ale's loosening tongues and the table's buzzing with chatter. Smart travelers sewed coins into their clothes or traveled in groups, but even that wasn't foolproof. You're eyeing the door, wondering if sleeping in the stable might be safer than this den of schemers. Modern travel warnings about sketchy neighborhoods? Try a world where every inn feels like a high-risk zone. The danger doesn't stop at theft. Fights break out over dice, debts, or just too much ale, and those eating knives everyone carries can turn deadly fast. You're trying to stay low, but the guy next to you's getting loud, accusing someone of cheating. The innkeeper's stick might break up a brawl, but not before someone's sporting a new scar. Outside, the risks are worse. Thieves and bandits often loitered near inns, listening to gossip about who's leaving at dawn or carrying gold. You're rethinking that story you shared about your next stop, because the wrong ears might be planning an ambush. Compared to your modern Uber ride with GPS tracking, leaving this inn feels like rolling the dice on your survival. Then there's the inn itself. The creaky wooden structure, lit by candles and warmed by an open hearth, is a fire trap waiting to happen. You're praying the drunk guy waving his mug doesn't knock over a candle, because one spark could turn this place into an inferno. Towns had curfew bells to signal, cover the fires, but in a packed inn, accidents were common. You're keeping one eye on the exits, just in case. Add to that the risk of food poisoning from that never-empty stew pot, and you're wondering how anyone made it out alive. The inn's a gauntlet of risks, and you're just trying to survive the night without losing your money, your health, or your life. You're gripping your mug, scanning the crowd for threats, and realizing this inn isn't a refuge, it's a battlefield. The gossip's still flying, the dice are still rolling, and every laugh could hide a scheme. You're learning to trust no one, not even the innkeeper's gruff hospitality. The medieval world doesn't come with a safety net, and you're right in the thick of it, hoping to see dawn with your purse intact. You're still hanging on in this York inn, 1342, your nerves frayed from dodging thieves and suspicious glances at the communal table. The air's thick with smoke, ale, and the lingering stench of that mystery stew, and the innkeeper's stick swinging does little to tame the drunken chaos. Your straw mattress is calling, but the thought of fleas and snoring strangers keeps you glued to your mug. Thieves aren't the only threat here. Dangers baked into every corner of this place, from the flickering candles to the never-washed stew pot. Think you'd outlast the unseen hazards of a medieval inn? Compared to your modern smoke detectors and food safety standards, this is like living in a tinderbox with a side of Russian roulette for dinner. Let's dive into the silent killers of inn life: fire, food poisoning, and disease, where one wrong move could end your journey faster than a bandit's knife. Fire's the biggest threat, and it's everywhere. This inn's a wooden shack packed with straw mattresses, lit by candles and warmed by an open hearth that's spitting sparks. One clumsy drunk knocking over a candle could turn the place into a bonfire. You're eyeing the guy waving his mug, praying he doesn't trip near the hearth, because fire safety in 1342 is a fantasy. Towns like York had curfew bells, 9 p.m. in winter, 10 p.m. in summer, that doubled as a signal to cover the fires, meaning douse or bank the flames to prevent accidents. But in a packed inn with ale flowing, good luck enforcing that. Records from London in 1340 show fines for innkeepers who let fires burn past curfew, yet accidents were common, with entire buildings reduced to ash. Compared to your modern fire alarms and sprinklers, this is like camping in a matchbox. Yelp review: 1 star, nearly became a human torch because someone tripped with a candle. Then there's the food, or what passes for it. That mystery stew you choked down? It's not just questionable taste, it's a health hazard. The inn's cauldron never stops simmering, with yesterday's scraps becoming today's dinner. No refrigeration, no health inspectors, just a pot that's been cooking since the last king's coronation. Food poisoning wasn't a term they used, but it was a fact of life. You're rubbing your stomach, hoping that queasy feeling is just nerves, but nearby monasteries often treated travelers with bad stew belly, a polite way of saying you're one bad bite away from praying for a quick death. One quirky detail: some travelers carried herbs like sage, believing they'd ward off tainted food spirits. Spoiler: they didn't. Modern FDA regulations? A distant dream. You're eating at your own risk, and the odds aren't great. Disease is the invisible killer, especially in a place this crowded. You're shoulder to shoulder with strangers who haven't bathed in weeks, sleeping in beds crawling with fleas that could carry more than just an itch. The Black Death is a few years away, but smaller outbreaks of fever or plague were already wreaking havoc. Inns were petri dishes, with travelers spreading germs faster than gossip. Some towns, wise to the risk, banned sick travelers during outbreaks, forcing them to camp outside the walls. In 1342, you're scanning the crowd for anyone coughing too hard, because one sneeze could mean quarantine, or worse. You're wishing for a modern face mask, but all you've got is a cloak to pull over your nose. Historians debate whether inns amplified diseases like the plague or were just unlucky hotspots. Either way, you're breathing in medieval germs with every whiff of ale-soaked air. The innkeeper's not much help. He's too busy refilling mugs to notice the candle teetering on a table or the guy retching in the corner. Some inns had crude health checks. If you looked too sickly, you were out, but it was more about avoiding trouble than saving lives. You're keeping your distance from the guy with the hacking cough, but in this packed hall, personal space is a myth. The stew pot's still bubbling, the hearth still crackling, and you're calculating your odds of making it to morning. Modern sanitation, clean water, soap, antibiotics, feels like science fiction. Here, survival means dodging flames, bad food, and whatever's festering in the guy next to you. You're gripping your mug, eyes darting from the hearth to the crowd, realizing this inn's a death trap disguised as a refuge. The gossip's still flying, the dice games are still loud, but now you're noticing the risks in every flicker of light and every bite you took. You're not just a traveler, you're a gambler, betting your life on every decision. The night's far from over, and the inn's dangers are just warming up. Good luck sleeping through this gauntlet. You're still holding on in this chaotic York Inn, 1342, your nerves shot from dodging thieves, questionable stew, and the ever-present threat of a candle sparking a fire. The communal table's a mess of empty mugs and loud gossip, and the innkeeper's stick-waving does little to calm the drunken singers or dice game brawls. You're itching to escape to your straw mattress, fleas and all, but the thought of what waits outside the inn's creaky walls is just as daunting. The roads beyond York are no safer than this ale-soaked madhouse, maybe worse. Think you'd brave the medieval highways? Compared to your modern GPS-guided Uber ride, traveling these muddy paths is like rolling the dice with bandits, bad weather, and a justice system that's more shrug than shield. Let's step outside the inn and into the perilous world of 14th century travel, where leaving the chaos behind only means trading one danger for another. The moment you step onto the road, you're a target. Bandits lurk along trade routes like this one, and inns are their favorite intelligence hubs. That loudmouth at the table bragging about his coin purse? He's practically painting a bullseye on his back. Thieves and highwaymen hang around inns, eavesdropping on travel plans or bribing the innkeeper for tips on who's carrying gold. In 1347, records from nearby towns noted that bandit attacks often targeted travelers fresh from inns, ambushed just miles from safety. You're kicking yourself for mentioning your route to that friendly merchant over dinner, because he might have sold you out for a mug of ale. Compared to your modern travel app with real-time traffic updates, this is like navigating with a map that screams, "Good luck, sucker." Bandits aren't subtle. Some block the road outright, demanding your purse or your horse, sometimes both. Others use tricks, like posing as fellow travelers or faking a broken cart to lure you close. One quirky detail: some bandits left taunting signatures, like a knotted rope or a slashed saddle, as if robbing you wasn't enough. You're clutching your knife, wishing for a modern police hotline, but out here, you're on your own. Smart travelers move in groups, banding together with strangers from the inn for safety. You're eyeing the farmer and the pilgrim from dinner, wondering if they're worth trusting or if they'll ditch you at the first sign of trouble. It's a gamble, but going solo's worse. The roads themselves are a nightmare. They're muddy, rutted tracks, barely wide enough for a cart, and rain turns them into swamps. You're slogging through ankle-deep muck, praying your boots don't get sucked off. Bridges are rickety, fords are treacherous, and waymarkers, stone crosses or crude signs, are often missing or wrong. You're navigating by vague directions from the innkeeper, like, turn left at the big oak, which is useless when every tree looks the same. Compared to your modern road trip with clear signs and rest stops, this is like hiking through a maze with no exit. If you're lucky, you'll reach the next town by nightfall. If not, you're sleeping in a ditch, hoping the wolves don't find you first. Justice. Don't count on it. If you're robbed, the local sheriff might listen, but medieval law favors locals over travelers. You're an outsider, and unless you've got a noble's backing, your complaint's just noise. Courts are slow, corrupt, or both, and bandits know it. In 1342, travelers often settled scores themselves, which is why your knife's never far from your hand. You're wishing for a modern legal system, but here, justice means catching the thief yourself, or paying someone to do it. Historians debate whether bandits operated like organized crime syndicates, with networks spanning towns, or were just desperate loners. Either way, they're your problem now, and they're not picky about their targets. Then there's the plague risk. During outbreaks, towns like York banned travelers, forcing you to wait outside the walls for days to prove you're not sick. You're praying you don't cough, because one sniffle could mean exile, or a mob chasing you off. Some towns had pest houses for suspect travelers, but they were more prison than hospital. You're double-checking your cloak for suspicious spots, because the inn's crowded sleeping hall was a germ factory. Modern travel bans with clear protocols? A pipe dream. Here, it's chaos, suspicion, and a whole lot of hoping you don't look too pale. You're standing by the inn's door, steeling yourself for the road ahead. The gossip inside's still loud, but out here, the silence feels heavier, broken only by the wind or a distant howl. You're rethinking every word you shared at the table, every glance you caught from the corner. The inn's dangers, thieves, fire, disease, were bad enough, but the road's a whole new gauntlet. You're not just a traveler, you're prey, and every step's a test of luck and nerve. You're still clinging to survival in this York Inn, 1342, your head spinning from the gauntlet of dangers inside and out. The communal table's a mess of spilled ale and half-told stories, the air thick with smoke and the innkeeper's shouts to quiet the drunken singers. You've dodged thieves, questionable stew, and the looming threat of bandits on the road ahead, but you're starting to see this chaotic inn as more than a risky place to crash. It's a lifeline, a hub where people, news, and deals collide in a messy, ale-soaked dance. Think you'd appreciate the bigger picture of a medieval inn's role? Compared to your modern rest stop or co-working space, this place is like a social network, marketplace, and newsstand rolled into one. Minus the Wi-Fi but with way more drama. Let's step back and explore why inns like this were the heartbeat of medieval life, connecting a fragmented world one mug at a time. In 1342, inns aren't just beds and bad stew, they're the glue holding medieval society together. You're sitting at a table with a farmer, a merchant, and a pilgrim, and their chatter's a live feed of the world. The farmers grumbling about crop prices, the merchants negotiating a wool deal, and the pilgrims sharing news of a shrine in Canterbury. This isn't just gossip, it's intelligence. Inns are communication hubs, where information flows faster than a horse can gallop. A merchant might learn about a new trade route, or a farmer might hear about a drought that'll affect his planting. In a world without phones or newspapers, these conversations are gold. Historians note that inns along trade routes, like this one in York, were critical for spreading news across regions, from market trends to royal decrees. The inn's role goes beyond talk. It's a proto-post office, too. By the 1380s, German records show inns acting as relay points for early postal systems, with travelers passing letters or messages to the next stop. You're overhearing a merchant entrust a sealed note to a traveler headed to London, and it's not just a letter, it's a contract that could make or break a deal. The innkeeper's in on it, maybe taking a cut for ensuring the message gets through. You're realizing this place isn't just a dive bar, it's a node in a medieval network, linking towns and traders. Compared to your modern email or delivery apps, this is slow and risky, but it's how the world stays connected. Yelp review. 1 star for the fleas, but 5 for knowing the price of Len in Bruges before anyone else. Inns also shape the physical world. This one's on a major trade route, and its existence helps define the road itself. Many modern highways in England, like the A1, trace their paths back to medieval inn networks, with some roads still bearing names like the Red Lion or the White Hart. You're walking a path carved by centuries of travelers stopping here for ale and a bed. Towns gave tax breaks to innkeepers to keep these hubs running, knowing they drove commerce. The inn's not just a building, it's an economic engine, storing goods for merchants and hosting deals that fuel trade. You're watching a farmer and a merchant haggle over grain, and the innkeeper's nodding. He's not just serving stew, he's witnessing contracts that keep York's market alive. Even the chaos has a purpose. The mix of strangers, locals, travelers, shady types, creates a melting pot where ideas and cultures clash. You're hearing a pilgrim describe a spice from a far-off market, or a merchant curse in a language you don't recognize. It's not just trade, it's cultural exchange, messy and loud. Archaeological digs show inns had better waste systems than most homes, with ditches to manage the mess of so many people. This place is a step up from a peasant's hut, even if it doesn't feel like it when you're dodging a drunk's elbow. Historians debate whether inns were the seeds of modern cities or just chaotic stopovers. Spoiler, they're both, laying the groundwork for everything from postal routes to urban hubs. The innkeeper's a key player, too. He's not just pouring ale, he's a gatekeeper, deciding who gets a bed and who sleeps in the stable. Some could peg your hometown by how you complained about their brew. Londoners always hated York's ale, apparently. You're starting to see why inns matter, despite the risks. They're where deals are struck, news spreads, and the world shrinks just a little. You're not just a traveler, you're part of a system, caught in a web of stories, schemes, and shaky beds. The inn's a microcosm of medieval life, gritty, vital, and impossible to ignore. Part 15, The Legacy of Inns, Connecting a World Across Time. You're still clinging to life in this smoky York inn, 1342, your senses battered by the chaos of drunken ballads, dice game brawls, and the ever-present whiff of mystery stew. The innkeeper's stick-waving hasn't tamed the crowd, and your straw mattress, fleas and all, feels like a distant dream. You've dodged thieves, survived the ale, and braced for the bandit-ridden roads ahead, but now you're seeing this place for what it really is. Not just a pit stop, but a cornerstone of medieval life. Think you'd recognize the lasting impact of these rowdy inns? Compared to your modern hotels or coffee shops, this inn's a blueprint for connection, culture, and commerce that echoes into today's world. Let's pull back the curtain on the legacy of medieval inns, where the chaos you're enduring shaped history, one ale-soaked night at a time. This inn's a cultural crossroads, and you're right in the middle. The farmer at your table swapping crop tips with a merchant from Flanders, while a pilgrim hums a hymn that'll spread to the next town. These interactions aren't just noise, they're threads in a tapestry of exchange. Inns like this one mixed languages, recipes, and ideas, blending local traditions with far-off influences. Archaeological digs show inns served dishes that traveled along trade routes. Think spiced stews inspired by distant markets, a medieval version of fusion cuisine. One quirky detail: some recipes, like a barley-heavy pottage, spread so far via inns that they became staples across Europe. You're not just eating, you're tasting history in the making, even if it's stuck to your trencher. Compared to your modern food truck or globalized menus, this is where culinary cross-pollination began. Inns were also pioneers of infrastructure. You're sleeping in a place with better waste systems than most peasant homes. Crude ditches, sure, but enough to handle the mess of dozens of travelers. Records from 1442 Italy show inns registering guests, an early stab at tracking movement that laid the groundwork for modern hospitality. Some inns specialized, catering to pilgrims, merchants, or scholars, like medieval boutique hotels without the charm. You're noticing the innkeeper's ledger, scribbling who paid what, and it's not just bookkeeping, it's a system that'll evolve into the hotels you know today. Places like the Beau Rivage in Geneva trace their roots to these chaotic hubs. Historians debate whether inns were the first true, public spaces, or just commerce-driven chaos. Spoiler: they're both, sparking the idea that strangers could share a roof and a story. The inn's legacy isn't just physical, it's social. By forcing strangers together, it broke down barriers, even if it meant dodging a drunk's elbow. You're hearing a merchant curse in Dutch, a pilgrim pray in Latin, and a farmer laugh at a joke from a town you've never heard of. These moments knit Europe's patchwork cultures closer, one shared mug at a time. Inns fostered trust, or at least tolerance, among people who'd otherwise never meet. You're part of that, whether you like it or not, caught in a web of human connection that'll outlast this creaky building. Compared to your modern social media, where you choose your bubble, this is raw, unfiltered mingling, complete with the smell of ale and the risk of a knife fight. Economically, inns were powerhouses. This one's on a trade route, its existence shaping the road's path and the town's wealth. Taxes from innkeepers funded York's growth, and merchants like the one next to you rely on these hubs to store goods or strike deals. You're watching a farmer haggle over grain, and it's not just dinner talk, it's the pulse of medieval commerce. Inns were so vital that towns offered land grants to keep them running, knowing they drew travelers and their coins. You're not just a guest, you're a cog in an economic machine that's building the future, one muddy road at a time. Modern strip malls or co-working spaces owe a nod to these early hubs, where business and chaos went hand in hand. As you lean back, dodging a splash of ale, you realize this inn's more than a risky night's sleep. It's a bridge between people, places, and eras. The gossip, the fights, the fleeting friendships, they're all part of a system that connected a fragmented world. You're not just surviving, you're witnessing the roots of modern travel, trade, and even the idea of a shared space. The fleas and the noise are worth it, maybe, for a front-row seat to history. You're back in the York Inn, 1342, the memory of that chaotic night still vivid, the drunken ballads, the dice-fueled fights, and the ever-present threat of thieves or a rogue candle. You're picturing the innkeeper, that gruff figure with a stick in one hand and a mug in the other, weaving through the crowd like a captain steering a sinking ship. He's more than a host, he's the linchpin of this madhouse, balancing profit, order, and survival in a world where one bad night could ruin him. Think you'd handle the stress of running a medieval inn? Compared to your modern barista juggling latte orders or a hotel manager checking bookings, this guy's job is like herding cats in a storm while dodging lightning. Let's shine a light on the innkeeper's world, where every decision shapes the inn's fate and your shaky night's rest. The innkeeper's not just pouring ale, he's a businessman, diplomat, and bouncer rolled into one. You're watching him haggle with a merchant over the price of a private room. His voice sharp, but his eyes scanning for trouble. He's got to keep the ale flowing, laws from 1237 mandate it, but he's also dodging fines for watered-down brews, a common trick to stretch supplies. In 1314, York records show innkeepers penalized for serving ale in unmarked containers, costing them weeks of profit. He's got a ledger, crude but critical, tracking who's paid and who's likely to skip out. You're clutching your coins, knowing one wrong move could land your horse in his stable as payment. Compared to your modern POS system or Venmo, this is high-stakes math with no room for error. He's also a gatekeeper of information. Travelers like you spill their plans over ale, and the innkeeper's ears are always open. He knows who's heading to London, who's carrying gold, and who's too drunk to notice a missing purse. Some innkeepers sold tips to bandits, a side hustle that could pad their pockets or backfire spectacularly. You're catching his glance as you mention your next stop, and it's not exactly warm. One quirky detail: innkeepers often judged your status by your complaints. Moan about the ale, and he'd peg you as a picky Londoner. You're keeping your mouth shut, because his goodwill might mean the difference between a decent bed or a spot with the rats. Modern Yelp reviews? He'd laugh, or swing his stick, at the idea of public feedback. His job's a balancing act. He's got to keep the peace, or at least stop the brawls from burning the place down. You're seeing him break up a dice game argument, his stick hovering like a warning. Town laws, like York's in 1340, held innkeepers liable for fights or fires, so he's not just grumpy, he's protecting his livelihood. He's also dodging disease risks, turning away travelers who look too sickly to avoid a quarantine shutdown. You're praying you don't cough, because his health check is a squint and a grunt. Compared to modern health codes or security teams, his tools are blunt: a stick, a glare, and a knack for spotting trouble. The innkeeper's life isn't glamorous. He's up before dawn, stoking the hearth, haggling with suppliers, and praying the stew doesn't poison anyone today. Yet he's vital. Without him, this inn, this hub of trade, gossip, and survival, collapses. You're starting to respect the guy, even if his ale's gritty and his beds are itchy. He's not just running a business, he's holding up a piece of the medieval world, one chaotic night at a time. You're back in that York Inn, 1342, the chaos still swirling, dice clattering, ale splashing, and the innkeeper's stick cutting through the din. You've seen the inn as a hub, survived its dangers, and nodded to the innkeeper's gritty rule, but now your eyes land on the women in this smoky scene. They're not just serving ale or scrubbing pots, they're players in this medieval game, wielding influence in a world stacked against them. Think you'd notice the quiet strength of women in a medieval inn? Compared to your modern workplace with its HR policies and glass ceilings, this is a tougher arena, where women carved out power with wit, grit, and sometimes a well-timed glare. Let's uncover the roles of women in the inn, from alewives to silent partners, and see how they shaped this chaotic world. Women are everywhere in the inn, often overlooked but never idle. You're watching a serving woman weave through the crowd, balancing mugs with a grace that defies the drunken elbows. She's not just a waitress, she's a diplomat, dodging crude jokes while keeping the ale flowing. Many inns were run by women or husband-wife teams, with the wife handling everything from brewing to bookkeeping. In 1342, English records show women listed as alewives, brewing the inn's lifeblood and selling it under strict town rules. You're sipping her brew, gritty but safe, and it's her skill keeping you alive. Water's a death trap, but her ale's boiled clean. Compared to your modern craft brewery, her setup's crude, but her product's a medieval necessity. Some women ran the show outright. Widows often inherited inns, turning them into power bases. You're catching the innkeeper's wife, sharp-eyed and sharper-tongued, tallying coins while her husband swings his stick. She's no sidekick, she's the brains, tracking who's paid and who's trouble. Records from York in 1350 note widows running inns as independent businesses, navigating taxes and fines with a savvy that rivals any merchant. One quirky detail: some aloes marked their brews with a broomstick outside, a sign of quality that doubled as a jab at sloppy competitors. You're respecting her hustle, because crossing her might mean no ale, or a night in the stable. Women also worked the shadows. You're noticing a woman cleaning tables, her ears catching every word of the merchant's deal. She's not just scrubbing, she's gathering intel, maybe passing it to the innkeeper or a thief for a cut. Others played matchmaker, spotting wealthy travelers and nudging them toward local daughters, or less savory deals. These women weren't powerless, they were strategists, using their roles to wield influence in a man's world. Historians debate whether inns empowered women or trapped them in grueling labor. Spoiler: it's both, but their impact's undeniable. You're seeing the inn differently now, knowing every mug and meal carries a woman's unseen work. The risks were real. Women faced harassment, low pay, and the constant threat of violence in a room full of drunk strangers. Yet they persisted, brewing, serving, and sometimes outsmarting the men around them. You're tipping your mug to the alewife, because without her, this inn's just a shack. She's not just part of the chaos, she's mastering it, one pour at a time. You're still in the thick of this York Inn, 1342, the noise of drunken shouts and clinking mugs blending with the crackle of the hearth. You've navigated thieves, tasted the alewife's brew, and felt the innkeeper's iron grip on this chaos, but now something else catches your eye. A scruffy dog sniffing your boots, a cat darting across the table, and the faint whinny of horses from the stable outside. Animals aren't just background noise in this inn, they're part of its pulse, from pest control to profit. Think you'd handle the furry and feathered chaos of a medieval inn? Compared to your modern pet-friendly cafe or sanitized hotel, this place is a zoo where animals are both helpers and hazards. Let's explore the four-legged world of the inn, where rats, cats, and horses shape the scene as much as the humans. The dog at your feet isn't a pet, it's security. You're watching it growl at a stranger who gets too close to the ale barrels, its hackles up like a furry bouncer. Dogs were common, doubling as guards and cleanup crew, gobbling up scraps from the floor before they turned to sludge. In 1342, records mention inns fined for overly aggressive dogs, which means this mutt might take a nip if you're not careful. You're tossing it a bit of trencher, hoping to stay on its good side. Compared to your modern no pets allowed hotel, this dog's a staff member, and a grumpy one. Yelp review: 1 star, the dog's friendlier than the innkeeper but still tried to steal my bread. Cats are the unsung heroes, though you wouldn't know it from the mangy one eyeing your stew. They're here for the rats, which swarm the inn's stores and bedding like tiny bandits. You're grateful for the cats prowling, because those rats aren't just thieves, they're plague carriers. One quirky detail: some travelers believed cats were bad luck, but innkeepers kept them anyway, valuing pest control over superstition. You're watching the cat leap onto a beam, nabbing a rat mid-squeak, and it's a small victory in this germ-ridden chaos. Modern exterminators with their sprays and traps? A fantasy. Here, the cat's your best defense, even if it steals a bite of your trencher when you're not looking. Horses are the inn's economic backbone, stabled out back where the air's only slightly less foul. You're hearing their stomps and snorts, a reminder of the trade route that keeps this place alive. The innkeeper charges extra to feed and guard your horse, but you're paying, because losing it means walking to London. Some innkeepers ran side hustles, borrowing horses from unpaid guests or tipping off bandits about juicy targets. In 1347, York records show travelers suing over stolen mounts, a risk you're all too aware of. You're checking your horse's tether, because a modern parking garage with cameras feels like a distant dream. The stable's a lifeline, but it's also a target, and you're not taking chances. Rats and fleas, though, are the real menace. You're feeling an itch, knowing the fleas in your bed came from the rats the cat hasn't caught yet. They're not just pests, they're health hazards, spreading disease in a world with no antibiotics. You're wishing for a modern pest control service, but all you've got is a cat and a prayer. The animals, dogs, cats, horses, rats, are as much a part of this inn as the ale or the gossip, shaping its rhythm and its risks. You're giving the dog another scrap, hoping it'll guard your boots tonight, because in this zoo, every ally counts. Now, let's ease you out of this smoky inn. Picture the chaos fading, the dice games quieting, the innkeeper's shouts softening, the hearth's glow dimming. You're sinking into your modern bed, clean sheets and all, far from the fleas and the mystery stew. Those medieval inns, for all their madness, built something lasting. They connected strangers, sparked ideas, and paved the way for the world you know. Hotels, highways, even that coffee shop where you swap stories today. You survived a night in 1342, and it wasn't easy, but it showed you how humans, even in the grimiest of times, found ways to come together. So, take a deep breath. Let the hum of your fan or the stillness of your room pull you back. You're safe now, no bandits or rats to worry about. If you're still awake, drop a comment. Where are you, and what time is it? If you liked this journey, hit that like button and subscribe for more. For now, close your eyes. Let the medieval world slip away. Sleep tight, and dream of something softer than a straw mattress. End of script. Good night.